I'm Elizabeth Vincentelli, and I write about theater, and music, and TV, and skiing for the New York Times and other outlets.
Yes, she does. And I'm Peter Marks, longtime fan, first-time caller. Welcome to another installment of your favorite theater podcast, Marks and Vincentelli.
You know, I like your confidence, and I entirely agree with it.
Totally.
So there you go.
Thank you.
Now, this episode features a guest who uses the tools of theater to create deep conversations in audiences that desperately seek connection to the world around them. His name is Brian Doris. Did I pronounce that right?
You did.
You know what? With me, you never know what's going to come out of my mouth. I don't even know. Is it going to sound right? Am I completely mangling someone's name, a play's title,
but
an animated cartoon character?
Yes, but
name?
SpongeBob will live forever as SpongeBob to me.
It's my signature, and I'm getting T-shirts made.
Oh, that
you might
should.
get one. Anyway, Brian runs an organization called Theater of War, and he brings together some great actors and some budding ones, which I think you can tell us more about.
Hello.
Who read classic plays inspired by pressing social issues.
Yes, Elizabeth, you've alluded to the fact that I happen to be one of those budding actors. I was invited to join what Brian lovingly calls the circus, this massive number of actors that he recruits for his productions. After I wrote about Theater of War productions for the Washington Post, Brian will talk to us about the roots of the group, which started 18 years ago in hospitals and then reading Greek drama for military audiences. His roster of actors is stellar, including
wild, I would say.
Yeah. No, it's every name you name the person they've been in: Jeffrey Wright, Oscar Isaac, Elizabeth Marvel, Amy Ryan, Bill Murray, Bill Camp, and on and on and on.
And Peter Marks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he'll tell us how he's managed to enlarge his vision of theater. He'll talk about some of the projects he's currently developing and why this is all so vital, especially now.
Yeah, and his latest project is the world premiere of A Refutation, which is February 21st in Washington, D.C., and it's a reading of documents surrounding a racial controversy over a yellow fever epidemic in Philadelphia in 1793. And the players include Brian F. O'Byrne, Michael Potts, Chad Coleman, and Peter Marks, which I think is the theme of today's episode, and Peter Marks.
That's enough about me, but what do you think of me? Anyway, we'll be asking him about another of his new initiatives. It's built around great pieces of long-form journalism. Mm-hmm. He's really amalgamating theater and journalism, in which he gets some of these great actors to read influential pieces from major outlets like The Atlantic and The New Yorker. The first, broadcast on WNYC in New York, featured 4 actors in a reading of what they called The Subway Killing That Divided America, based on a New Yorker article about Daniel Penny, who was found not guilty of killing Jordan Neely in a chokehold on a New York City subway. Became a very famous case on national news. Mm-hmm. So, Brian Doris, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Maybe start off, the best way to orient our listeners who don't know much about Theater of War. Tell us about Theater of War, your background in the classics, and where those ideas merged into becoming this very unique enterprise.
Sure. Well, the name of the company is Theater of War Productions, and Theater of War is one of over 40 projects that now live under that umbrella. So I'm going to refer to Theater of War Productions when I talk about the work, except when speaking about our military project, which is called Theater of War. But Theater of War Productions has been around for 18 years, and we have over 40 projects that all address pressing public health and social issues through the strategy of presenting performances of seminal texts for often curated audiences with something at stake as a framework for engaging them in dialogue about challenging, sometimes divisive subjects. We address lots and lots of different things, from mental health to climate change to gun violence, you name it. And we've been around almost 2 decades. The inception of Theater of War really came from a formless hunch that ancient Greek war plays that were written by a general and performed in their own time for as many as 17,000 citizen soldiers in a century in which they saw nearly 80 years of war, that these ancient Greek tragedies would speak to contemporary military audiences today. And I think more pointedly that military audiences would have something powerful to reveal about these ancient Greek tragedies once they had heard them or seen them performed. And that formless hunch was borne out when I convinced the U.S. Marine Corps to allow me to present my first performance of Theater of War in San Diego in a Hyatt ballroom for 400 Marines and their spouses. And we brought 5 actors over to San Diego, David Strathairn and Bill Camp and Heather Raffo and Jesse Eisenberg. And we performed 6 scenes from 2 ancient Greek war plays about the Trojan War and about warriors struggling under the weight of their service to maintain their dignity and honor, and about suicide, about moral injury, about what we now call PTSD. And we scheduled a 45-minute discussion with those Marines. And the discussion that night in San Diego lasted 3.5 hours, and it had to be cut off at midnight. And every person who spoke quoted lines from the plays from memories, if they'd known these obscure plays by Sophocles their entire lives. Wow. Of course they had, because they'd lived these plays, they'd lived the experience. And we didn't just hear from the generals, we heard from lance corporals and command sergeant majors and and spouses and children. And it became very clear that first performance for a military audience was that I barely apprehended what was happening in the room. And I thought I was really clever coming into that room. I translated the play from ancient Greek. The texts were things I'd sat with for a really long period of time. I'd rehearsed them with these incredible actors. So I thought that I was the shaman bestowing the gift of theater upon this audience. And what I soon realized was that I was the initiate. And that I was there to learn. And it was as if a veil had been pulled back, and I saw that when dealing with audiences with something at stake who'd lived the life and death stakes of the plays that we were performing, that those audiences always knew more than we did. Those audiences always know more than we do. And so I think the last 18 years of our work has been about what happens when we as artists approach audiences with humility for what they know.
Is that what you meant? I'm sorry. Is that what you meant by curated audiences? Like that there's a connection between the audience and
always, yeah. So a huge portion of the funding that we've raised to sort of support this enterprise goes to building audiences that have something at stake. And more since 2016, building audiences with oppositional viewpoints and something at stake.
Well, what do you mean? I mean, what do you mean by oppositional viewpoints?
I mean, I would say, to put a finer point on it, building choruses that cannot preach to themselves by design. Which is to say, our first project that really moved into this space was Antigone and Ferguson in 2016. It's a project we premiered on the stage that Michael Brown graduated from at Normandy High School, just outside of Ferguson, Missouri. And we decided we'd perform Sophocles' Antigone, but we'd create a chorus that couldn't preach to itself by design, that included Black Lives Matter activists, Michael Brown's friends and teachers, including his drama teacher, members of the faith community, and most critically, members of law enforcement who'd responded to the uprising in Ferguson itself. And with all of our work, the directive, the provocation, the request, the invitation is not to agree. That's not what we're asking people. But we're asking people to agree, to hear each other's interpretations. We're asking people, in the case of these collaborative projects, to sing together or to perform together and to hear each other's truths and perspectives. So we've done this in rival gang territories. We've done this in the detention camps in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. We've done this as Peter can attest to as an actor in our company, in a county in Ohio that voted more than 80% for Trump in the last election, where the chorus that emerged was a conservative chorus, and those liberals who participated were in the minority. That same project, An Enemy of the People, we recently did in Times Square, where the chorus was made up of climate activists from Extinction Rebellion. So that idea of audiences where we have people sitting, not just sitting side by side consuming culture, that they wouldn't sit next to each other. That's cool. I'm totally for that. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm interested in is what is possible when people have been moved by a performance. And what I think is possible is, for a fleeting moment, we're able to hold more complexity. We're able to acknowledge that we're all playing roles, and perhaps step back from the roles we're playing and see our own complicit role in the suffering of people to our left and our right. We're able to acknowledge that we're wearing masks all the time. And that's the utility of using actors, great actors, especially like the ones in our company, to deliver this material. So that's what I mean. We have a person on staff who's an audience curator. His name is Dominic DuPont. Dominic's principal qualification for that job is he spent 20 years in prison. And some people ask me for a job at Theater of War Productions, and I have like a PhD in performance studies. I say, go back, maybe go to prison for 20 years and come back and we can talk about.
How many times have I thought that?
Exactly. It's like, you thought that getting an MFA was the right path, but maybe committing a crime. But needless to say, it's not just that Dominic committed a crime, which he's the first to admit. He murdered someone. All joking aside, but he also got clemency from Governor Cuomo after 20 years in prison. And the way he got clemency was by finding the humanity in every person he engaged with. So that after he left prison, one of Dominic's corrections officers was standing by his side when he got married, or renewed his wedding vows. And he in fact married his probation officer from earlier in his life. So that's the job requirement, to find the humanity in everyone and make them feel welcome. And if not to put too fine a point on this, because I know, we should have more of an even flow here. I don't mean to just pop off, but when we had a big budget and we were doing Antigone and Ferguson for 10 weeks at St. Anne's Church in Brooklyn, all of our work is free. Our work is free by design, because I don't believe you can have conversations about human suffering and have them be transactional and have it be the same. It has to be a gift exchange. It can't be transactional. And so we spent all of the funds, most of the funds that we raised to support that 10-week run, on providing transportation and meals and childcare and support for what we called our VIP audience. And VIP audience, with regard to that particular issue, racialized police violence, were people living in NYCHA developments, people who were formerly incarcerated, people who had been homeless, experienced homelessness, people in and out of recovery, students attending Title I school, anywhere along the school to prison pipeline. And for us, that's the special sauce. For us, the audience is the main character in every drama. And that's because we leave the lights on, and because we try to take things back to where theater started in the amphitheater, which I'm sure you both know in Greek means the place where we see in both directions, where I see you and you see me. Amphitheatron, the seeing place where we see in all directions. And that can't be done since somewhere in the mid-19th century, someone decided that naturalism was predicated on turning off the lights and relegating the audience to silence. And the cinema only reinforced those trends. And nearly 200 years later, we're still in this position where we think that this construct of what is naturalism is predicated on erasing the audience from the equation and policing its every bodily function and silencing it at every turn. And maybe there's a discussion at the end, but it's called a talk back, which for me is an obscenity. It's like, how dare you talk back, except in this very, very legislated way. And we're going to set it up so you probably are going to end up asking the most banal question about artistic process, and we can continue to cultivate our antipathy as artists for you, the audience, that we've kind of been habituating over all these years. Anyway, Peter, I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, rail against the talkback. I'm here for that.
No, I don't even use the word talkback.
I know you don't. Yeah. I have been in Theater of War as both a performer, and I've also been an audience member. And I wonder, Brian, in what you're describing, and I've seen it happen, what Brian isn't saying is that, the actors do not participate at the end directly in the conversation. They leave the stage and are replaced by people who have been asked to respond to the work, and then it opens up to the audience as well, the general audience. And from my experience, Brian always starts when he asks the audience, his question is, what resonated for you? And it's a very profound question that I've actually adopted even in some of my other life choices of how I converse with people. But I wonder, Brian, if you think people listen to your productions in a different way than an audience is asked to gather, and when they buy a ticket and sit in a theater for a more conventional evening, if we can put it in those terms, are people more invested in reacting, in finding a way in and finding what it means to them because of the instructions you've given, because of the material, because of the way the audience has been curated?
Honestly, so I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and certainly in the early days, I thought I was a purist. We, as much of the audience as possible, had to have something at stake, have some skin in the game, or else, it was vanity for us. But I'm now convinced that even bad theatrical experiences are openings to powerful conversation, and that the worst theater can actually, in some ways, provoke profound exchanges. And maybe if there's any vanity, it was just in me working with the best actors on the planet, which I like to say we do at Theater of War Productions, because I've done it with community theater actors and the response is just the same. It's not the framework. I think it's just the invitation. And I think that I've done events where I've facilitated conversations at BAM and other theaters after performances or after documentary films or around books. And even then, it's just a series of strategies. We're not there to talk about artistic process. Artistic process is the thing that for some reason our culture has such endless appetite to talk about, and we reinforce it every chance we get, but it's a distraction from what actually just happened in the room, which is usually like a spiritual exchange that just occurred, or at the very least, a series of really powerful questions asked by a playwright or artist about a serious issue. Or even in a comedy, something so soul-stirring that just occurred. Needless to say, my feeling is that there's so much built into the architecture of the theater itself, into the security state that has pervaded the theater. I mean, I talk about this often. I took my daughter to see Six, and she loved Six. And yet we are treated with more kindness. I'm treated with more kindness when entering Rikers Island, which is a very dangerous and violent place, by the security apparatus there than we were at the Broadway Theater.
What do you mean?
I mean that people shout at you and they frisk you, and it's as if everyone's a potential threat. And that, if you've never been to the theater before, especially, is just an extension of the security state that pervades our culture to begin with. So the ways that institutions are built to keep people out who have something potentially to lend the experience, have something at stake, are myriad, and most of them aren't as obvious as that. The security state is right in front of us. Do we really need security guards? Do we really need to be frisked or wanded on our way into a Broadway theater? Most of these people would be lucky sometimes to make it through the event, given their age and their medical dispositions. They're not going to be shooting or firing weapons at the audience. But for those who have been adjudicated, for those who have had run-ins with the law or have been treated unfairly by the police, it's a lot more is at stake than just my daughter and I feeling comfortable about walking into a theater. It's there's so much. So, but I think it goes to I mentioned earlier, of course, the turning off of the lights, the relegation of the it's gotten better of late, but the behavior of ushers, the way they are shouting down the audience members and telling them how to behave and when to use their cell phones and when to use the bathroom and in what way. And And I would argue these things, I could list, you could list them too. I'm sure there's so many things that we take for granted as this is what is the theater. This is the theater that I think aren't actually intentional. They've just accrued, and they've accrued in such a way that the end result is that even if, for instance, Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal give the most soul-stirring performance in the upcoming production of Othello, and it moves the walls of the room back, and everyone is touched in some deep, deep way, and it resonates. The structure that's been built around that, the highly transactional structure, the security apparatus, the ushers, the darkness, the
$900 tickets.
The $900 tickets, these all accrue, and this isn't relegated to the commercial theater, because all the nonprofit theaters are all kind of based on this model too.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. I've got to say something there.
Yeah, please.
I do have huge issues with $900 ticket prices.
Yeah.
I don't really have an issue with an usher asking the person who's scrolling their phones next to me to stop.
Yeah. See, but I don't have an issue with the kid who's gang affiliated, who's got an earphone in one ear and is laughing at the places that the formally educated, acculturated audience think is inappropriate, then having a chance to speak and explicating why he's laughing and changing our whole understanding of what the play was we were listening to and watching.
Sure, yeah, no, but that's not what we're saying, though. That
It is what I'm saying. It's what I'm saying.
No, but that's not what I said.
Sure.
What I say is like, so do you have an issue with an usher asking someone scrolling on their phone next to me to stop? Because I don't have an issue with that.
I have an issue with, I'll back up. I honestly don't care what happens in the commercial theater. If people want to pay to be made to feel smarter than they actually are, they should have every right to go and pay that money and be made to feel smarter than they are. But I think that if we're trying to talk about what we're trying to achieve, which is open dialogue, then every act of policing, every act of telling people how to behave, every act of saying there are rules in this space and you must follow them, shuts down the possibility of free, pluralistic, open dialogue after the performance is over. And I recognize that we're in a very small minority of people who are interested in that. But what happens, yes, I'd be annoyed if someone was making a disturbance next to me or was blocking me while I was watching it, especially if I paid a lot of money to see a play. What I'm trying to say is for what we do, it is not useful to police the audience in any way, to tell people what to do. I've been at performances where I've seen the actors admonish the audience for burping or for hiccuping. But I think this antipathy toward the audience is something they've been habituated to believe and understand. And then because of the way we structure our relationship with audiences, their job is to listen quietly. And how dare they make any sort of some kind of display of their corporeal presence in the room other than clapping and laughing at the appointed time and place. I don't think anybody's going to make a stand that people should not burp. If you happen to, it's going to happen. Yeah, it should. People should be able to burp. Of course, in other cultures, burping as well is celebrated. It's just that, I won't name the actors because, obviously I know, but there are plenty of actors who have stopped performances because they've heard a cell phone go off or, in our performances, we have people, there'll be whole banks of people, most of whom have never been to a play before, mediating the experience with their phones, streaming to other people they want to share the experience with. To pretend we don't live in a world that's mediated by phones, or that we should be somehow protecting the intellectual property of artists, that's our job. Of course, I don't have to worry about Sophocles and Shakespeare and most of the playwrights we work with. I'm just not sure that's where we should be putting our energy.
I have to say that part of my education or my re-education has happened because of my participation in some of Brian's productions, and I will say that I have become far more tolerant of the people around me and how they are experiencing the play, I've stopped thinking, obviously, as we're talking, if someone's got, a hat on.
The hat. I was waiting for the hat because I know
the
you
hat,
hate the hat.
Or, somebody who's talking throughout the show and you're distracted. I mean, the extremes. Yeah. But, it's not a me experience anymore for me. It's an us experience. And I have to keep remembering that. It's a little bit, you as a critic, you become a little bit, what's the word? Not isolated, somewhat isolated, even in an audience. Yeah. And having foregone that sort of responsibility, the turning on the phone, the checking the time, and the looking, and your watch lights up. Those things are part of what this person has paid for. I haven't paid for you to do it, but some of it's invasive, but that's part of that is also because the show is not particularly engaging for them or whatever. True. Now, I am not discounting what, Elizabeth is saying about, people being admonished, but there is this increasing, and certainly with the wanding and the patrolling of people who take pictures during the show as if that property they're going to ruin the financial capital for the show by posting a picture of an actor in the play. I think that's, I think we've gone off the deep end a little bit in terms of trying to control how people see shows.
I totally hear that. I think I'm saying two separate things. One is, for our work, any type of, we want it to be a space where people feel comfortable being themselves. And those are the conditions that when we keep the lights on and we welcome people into that space. And so when we did Antigone and Ferguson for 10 weeks, 5 weeks in Harlem and 10 weeks in Brooklyn, we were able to hire our own front of house staff. And that front of house staff was a rainbow of people and of perspectives. And we were able to get rid of the box office, because even just the giving a ticket changes what it is, exchanging a ticket from my perspective for what we're doing. And to say then to that front of house staff that we train, your job is to welcome people into this space and to invite them to be themselves. And if that
happens.
And that happens.
I just want to pick one example, and then I'll let Elizabeth ask a question. Yeah. But so when we did Enemy of the People in Ohio. It may have been Washington, it may have been Ohio. I don't remember which show, but there's a scene in Enemy of the People that so works with this format. It's the staging of a public meeting at which Dr. Stockman is denounced and shamed for what he does, and the majority of the language that Ibsen used is to shout him down, is to get him shouted down, and the audience felt they had the freedom, some members of the audience, to have their own response. And there was a woman who stood up and walked towards the theater. She wasn't crazy. She was absolutely engaged and started screaming, "Let him speak," about Dr. Stockman. She was trying to defend him. She was totally in the moment. It mattered to her. It somehow was a representation for her of the stifling of dissent in our culture. All those things happening. And it was marvelous. It really was a signature moment for me in how transformational these events can be. Not everybody likes that because it's performative by someone else in the room beside the people they came to see. And when you're looking at Brian F. O'Byrne or Bill Murray, for God's sakes, performing, the celebrity power is what you're sort of grooving on to a lot of people. But anyway, it's the essence. It's somehow the essence of what I feel so energized by when I'm in a theater of the war room.
Yeah, Sorry, Elizabeth. Yeah.
Oh, no. I was actually, continue, because I was going to go into a slightly different direction. So if you want to.
All I was going to say is very briefly that, yes, that's it. If we've invited people to be themselves and we've tried, and I'm saying, it's still early days for us. I barely apprehend all the things that accrue to tell people this is not for you, or your role is to be quiet, because everything in our culture moves in that direction. So dismantling that to the point where people really feel free is It's not something you just flip a switch and you know how to do, and all of a sudden you're done.
I'm sorry, but if a Proud Boy is going to open their mouth, I'm going to say, you need to be quiet.
That's great.
Some people do need to be quiet.
No, in fact, I hear you, of course, but we live in a country, I would hope, at least for the foreseeable future, or, in the next few months at the most, where, freedom of expression is one of our core values and tenets. And in our model, the facilitated discussion that I'm interested in, the most repugnant things that get said are sometimes the most productive. And so shutting down speech because it's offensive, or shutting down speech even because it's hateful, actually robs the audience of the opportunity of responding to it in kind, not in a combative way, but with humanity. I'll say just briefly, like an example of this, going back to the military, as we were doing theater of war at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina during Suicide Prevention Week, and we're doing Sophocles' Ajax, and I'm asking questions in the facilitated discussion after the play, and the play is about a Greek warrior who commits suicide, takes his own life, takes his life, and after losing his best friend and being betrayed by his commanding officers. And someone in the audience raised their hand and said, I think everyone who contemplates suicide is a coward, and I have no sympathy for them whatsoever. They deserve to die. Now, that's not, in a normal DOD briefing about suicide, that would not be where you would start. That's not on the PowerPoint.
Right.
But it is illustrative. This is an environment where we can say what we really think and what we really feel, and we won't be shut down. We won't be canceled or shamed for having an oppositional view. So that young man says that, and I'm worried. And in the early days of theater of war, I might do something paternalistic, like step into the breach and try to sort of correct for it. But I have faith that audiences will always correct on their own, and it's sort of an act of condescension on my part as facilitator to try to legislate how it happens. So the next person who raises his hand is a Marine 3 times the size of the Marine who spoke before. And he turns out to everyone in the audience and he says, everyone in this audience knows I'm the hardest Marine in this room. And no one disputed him. And he says, and there's a war going on inside my head every day. And I think about suicide all the time. And I hope you don't think I'm a coward. And the audience of Marines stood up and they applauded him. And then he said, now, excuse me, Brian, I have to get to my therapy appointment. And he soon thereafter left. And I can tell you, story after story after story of examples where there's enormous tension in the room. Someone says something that for one side of the room feels repugnant or morally wrong. And rather than jumping into the breach or trying to shut it down, allowing the audience to respond, empowering it to respond. A climate denier speaks. Someone says something really mean-spirited about people who serve in the military in a mostly liberal community, or someone who with street homelessness stands up and he or she explicates something in a way that completely turns the power dynamics in the room on its head. And anyway, so in our model, we're not trying to pass the mic to the Proud Boys, but to date, there hasn't been an event where we haven't been able to hold anything that gets said and use it productively in the conversation. Now, have there been events where people have left screaming at each other? Absolutely. Where there's people screaming at each other in the parking lot afterwards? For sure. But the majority of people stayed in the room. They stayed in the room, and it got really uncomfortable. And my colleague, Marjolaine Goldsmith, says I'm kind of have some weird fetishes about these really intense moments, because I seem to really love them. And I do. Some people like jumping out of planes. Other people like taking drugs. I like performing for really resistant audiences who are thinking about how they might kill me before we perform and have something at stake in terms of what might happen. And I like performing for audiences where it could all fall apart. I like putting my head into the jaws of the lion and seeing what happens. And with our upcoming project, A Refutation in DC, where we're performing texts from 1793 about racial health inequities in America on Capitol Hill in this environment, it does feel like we might be putting our heads into the jaws of the lion. But I think it's critical that we try to create forums about issues, regardless of whether one side or the other wants to shut down speech around them. So that's been our goal. But of course, that puts me in a position where often like artists say, well, he colludes with the military, or he collaborates with Fox News, and we do. We've collaborated with Fox News to get to the veterans. How else am I going to get through MSNBC to the veterans? So I think about how with our work, we kind of have to get our hands dirty to even do it. We have to, and then I think part of the realization for the audience was the blood was always on our hands to begin with. It was always, we're all implicated in all of this. So anyway, that's how I feel. If a Proud Boy spoke at one of our events, I would not turn off his mic. I would try to create the conditions for someone to respond with humanity to that speech. And for better or for worse, I think that would be what we'd be modeling in a time where speech is being shut down in all directions.
I'm trying to imagine a situation where there would be a Proud Boy in a theater, but that's just me. Again, my bias. I can't imagine them.
I don't think it's unimaginable at all. I think it's very easy to imagine, actually.
I think Proud Boys like theater. Actually, the whole Red Pill community loves classics. And I mentioned to Peter, I think there was a moment where I even had a conversation before I knew who he was with Steve Bannon, who'd read my book, The Theater of War, who was very interested. Of course, Steve is a little bit of a outlier. He produced one of Julie Taymor's plays and had an interest in theater prior to his life at Breitbart and everything that's happened afterwards. But I think to your point, one of the reasons it works so well in conservative communities to deliver these Greek plays, Shakespeare, the text for Ibsen, is because even if they're not your classical theater going audiences, they respond. They love it. They love it just like anybody else.
So, Brian, I'm curious, you're always looking for new ways of doing your work. You've just started this long-form journalism project, which, seems to me part of your interest, your long-standing interest in journalism as a kind of adjacent craft. But maybe describe a little bit about what you're trying to do. It literally just debuted on WNYC, so it would be. And is this still? Are we still thinking theatrically when we're doing this kind of work?
Very much so. Yeah, I would say that the principal idea behind this new journalism series. And so Theater of War Productions presents all kinds of texts, from ancient Greek plays to sermons to speeches to modern works of poetry. We've read screenplays. Now we're reading works of journalism, long-form journalism. I don't see that as radically different. And we're deploying the actors to do that in a very similar way to the other types of texts we perform, which is to say to imbue them with a kind of emotional resonance and presence in the presence of an audience that mediates them, that creates an opening between the text and the audience that wouldn't have been there otherwise. It also decenters the written word and privileges the affective experience of the performance as the kind of currency of the conversation. So you don't have to even be literate to then be an expert on the experience of the play. And in fact, I would say the currency of the conversations that flow out of these performances, the hierarchy that's built is not on power and privilege and how many lifelong learning society the sessions you've gone to on Shakespeare or Sophocles. It's your proximity to loving and losing and dying and living and the fragility of our existence and unfortunately, so no one has a monopoly on that. And unfortunately, people from lower economic backgrounds often have more dynamic and rich experience to share. And not that it's equal opportunity, of course, all these things. All that's to say, the central idea, this was my colleague Marjolaine Goldsmith said two things. One is, why are the audio renderings of long-form journalists' work so soul-deadening to listen to? Now, not all of them. Some are good, but it's rare. Most are bad. Most sound like AI. And now most are being replaced by AI. So my very conspiratorial mind is like, well, were these outlets trying to make them sound like AIs so as to replace them by AI? Or is the dispassionate way that the actors or the AI are reading these texts an extension of the myth of journalistic integrity, of the dispassionate journalistic viewpoint? And if that's the case, then it's an aesthetic choice that's being made either very consciously or maybe unconsciously by these media outlets that are putting forth all this material. Now, I listen to a lot of this audio, even the AI. I mean, it's very useful to be able to wash the dishes and listen to the New York Times. I do it all the time. So Marjolaine brings that up. Why, if I'm listening to Audible, is Frances McDormand's one audio novel 1,000 times better than all the other ones I've ever heard? It's not just because it's Frances McDormand. It's because Frances McDormand is true to herself and her voice, and the same skills she brings to bear to acting, she brings to the reading of a text. So the one theory behind this work was, what if we bring to bear, we have 250 actors in our company, many of them award-winning, a lot of them incredibly talented, bring to bear their talents on long-form journalism and see what it awakens and livens in the material. The other, and this is my theory, is if all we did was that, then maybe that would be a service to journalism, and at a time when this inflection point for journalism itself, where we'd be shining a light on journalism and more people would be interested in it, and there'd be and long form journalism might have a life as audio in a different way. You know, the New York Times is trying things. They had Liev Schreiber do something. It's all, to me, it's all very produced, and I'm excited about our events on the radio because they're based on live events where you can hear the actors making mistakes, which is a totally different thing than a produced and slick thing that you're hearing in your ear to be consumed. So, but the second thing is, we are inured to the suffering we encounter in the news. This is not a newsflash. It requires the media putting pictures of children and women on the front page of the paper for us to care about the stories we're hearing about immigrants crossing borders, or Gaza, or Israel, or any of the things that are in the news, Africa, that are in the news today. It requires the more salacious, the more extreme stories to break through the numbness that we have that's sort of built up over time. And I think actors reading not dispassionately, but bringing a kind of emotional valence to the reading, not to manipulate the audience, but to bring the emotional and ethical stakes to the reading itself, will help readers and listeners engage with the news in a way that's actually appropriate, which is to say, to be in touch with how they feel, and not to be able to just compartmentalize it, but for a moment to like really sit with what these stories are saying. So just one quick example, when we did a pilot of this a year ago, we did an article called The Revolving Door from The New Yorker about the revolving door relationship in New York City between homelessness and mental illness and incarceration, and all the revolving door. And it was about the death. It was called The System That Failed Jordan Neely, and it centered on the Jordan Neely's death on the F train. And having Chad Coleman from The Wire, the actor in our company, just read 3 of Jordan's words that he said, "I need food." Not overselling it, but just bringing to bear a certain desperation in the room. Changed, I think, how everyone listened and received to the story in a way that one couldn't necessarily supply in one's head. That I don't think the AI has yet learned how to supply. Maybe it will. And that the actors who've been reading these stories for these outlets to date have not been directed to supply. And so I'm interested in that. So we did our first event last week, or just a few days ago, at WNYC. It's now on the radio, being broadcast this week twice. It's an experiment. What would happen if we perform long-form articles we partner with The New Yorker, The Atlantic, ProPublica, we hope The Guardian soon as well. And 4 audiences with something at stake.
Before a live audience.
Before a live audience. But again, so we did another piece about this one about the Daniel Penny verdict, written by the same author as the previous piece about Jordan Neely's death. We entitled it How a Subway Killing Divided America, because we have national aspirations in the conversation we're trying to frame. And we had David Strathairn, Chad Coleman, Amy Ryan, and Arliss Howard reading the text. And then we had an audience full of subway operators, train conductors, bus drivers, Marines, people who've experienced street homelessness, members of Fountain House who are, live with mental health issues, the INT teams that go down to the subways, and then the rest just average subway riders. That was a sort of prerequisite. And what would be possible now for a radio program in what will end up being a 51-minute program. And mind you, some of our events, those are 3 hours and average. So now we're compressing everything into what will end up being 50 minutes. Can we do that, maintain the integrity of our approach, hear from a variety of voices, both conservative and liberal and everything in between, and complexify the issue? And will it work as radio? Well, I'll let you all be the judge, because the link will be up by the time this comes out, and it's going to be free and open to the public. But I'm really excited. The first one is over. The next broadcast is happening tomorrow night. And for our next article with The Atlantic, we're going to be talking about GLP-1 drugs. This whole series is funded by the Lori Tisch Illumination Fund, and it's sort of arts and health is the sort of structure of their funding. So the whole series, the 6 that we have funded currently, are about health and public health and wellness. So that it's going to be an article by Rebecca Johns called A Diet Writer's Regrets, A Diet Writer's Regret. And it's about a woman who'd worked in journalism and for a long portion of her young life, adult life, really mostly got jobs working for diet magazines or writing about dieting, and couldn't follow her own advice. And ended up getting on GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and other drugs, but couldn't afford to stay on those drugs.
Wow.
Because of being a journalist and having a kid. And it's very vulnerable. It's very narrative driven. It's very character rich. It's going to be a 1-person performance, this next one. And that will take place at the Green Space on March 13th. Here in New York City at WNYC, recorded, and then the following Saturday and Tuesday will be broadcast on the air, we hope. So, and then I won't belabor the other ones we've locked in, but we're going to just be addressing a number of other themes. Other insurance is the next one. A big health investigation that we're maybe hoping to help ProPublica break. So one of my goals for the series is we perform articles that are just as they're dropping, especially big investigative pieces, and we're meeting the news as it's happening, and then kind of working to both amplify it and mediate it and talk about it.
Interesting.
So,
our time is running short, but I had one question, Brian, that I've been dying to ask you, which is why? I mean, you get great actors to do this. Why do you think all these actors want to be part of this?
Well, I mean, you should ask yourself, Peter, because you're a member of Peter, to be clear, is a critic who joined the circus and has now become a member of the tribe. And Elizabeth, you're always welcome.
I will spare you. I will spare you my attempt.
Well,
trust me.
Maybe in retirement. Regardless, we've had lots of public figures and other types.
I think when you do the show about Edith Piaf or the Marquis de Lafayette, I think then you got the perfect person.
Absolutely. If you need someone with a French accent, I will absolutely handle.
Noted.
I will.
I would say the short and quick answer is just simply that it's very rare in an actor's profession to be asked to do anything with your craft that moves the needle socially. That is not about your celebrity. Although, of course, people come wanting to see the actors. The only thing we ask them to do is act. And then as soon as they're done performing, they sit in the audience never to be heard from again. Because you had sort of talked about that earlier, Peter. For us, actors are kryptonite to discussion. They're the ultimate distraction from the spiritual exchange just happening in the room. They sort of permit us all as a culture. And I used to have a big chip on my shoulder about it. I now just feel like, of course, we're sort of avoidant species. We don't really want to talk about the uncomfortable things. So if there are actors in the room, we won't. We'll ask them the most banal questions we can come up with and pretend like we're talking at all, about something substantive. So that's number one. But number two is, I think for each person who participates, over 250 actors have been part of this. I mean, many have recommended it to their friends and their friends have recommended it to their friends. But I found that each person with us has always discovered on their own terms that doing this work has some significance for them very personally and idiosyncratically. People who've, I'm with Reggie Cathy, the late great actor, and we're flying to Okinawa and we're landing, and he's, for the first time since he was a child, seeing the fields that he played baseball on, growing up on that military base. Or, Dominic DuPont, who works for us as our community liaison, his first gig with us, where he's, is his first time back to Rikers Island after being released for 20 years in prison, where he was processed in. Every person finds their own, and you, Peter, obviously are finding your way, what it's doing for you. And I have to say, having a critic participate as an actor has been helpful to the actors. It's been helpful. It's been healing, I think, for you and for them. And you become friends with some of them. And this oppositional idea, it's like the critics didn't create this oppositional system that they're participating in, nor did the actors, but somehow they're pitted against each other in some way. Socially, they feel that there's a tension. And then once they're all on the same playing field and you're all performing, you're all submitting yourself to the exercise, then real connections can form that are who knows will they'll lead. Well, like your friendship with Elizabeth Marvel, one of the actors you acted with.
Totally.
And so I'm excited about that. It's like, even for those who are doing it, just like for the audience, it can have transformative effects to simply submit yourself to the exercise.
It's a very profound experience for me on many levels, and I can absolutely endorse what you're saying, Brian, about these relationships that were sort of taboo, that suddenly become real and authentic, and there's an understanding that there are shared values, and those things are very, very fulfilling for me. So thank you for including me.
Well, you turn out to be a terrific actor. So it's so
you heard it here, folks.
Yeah, I'm the critic now. So
well, thank you.
This is on the marquee of the terrific actor.
Believe me, that's going to be
Peter Marks. Well, I will say this out loud. Peter knows this, but Elizabeth, you're very much invited, because this would be a low bar to entry. We are in discussions right now with the National Press Club about doing an Enemy of the People there in DC in the ballroom. And the idea is that the angry mob in the town hall scene will be journalists, and Peter would like to fill it with disgruntled former Washington Post
I feel
journalists.
so seen.
No shortage.
Too close.
No shortage.
But needless to say, in that iteration of the project, because we're constantly sort of tinkering with what text we're performing and even what cut of the text, we will do Act 3, which is the act in which, as I'm sure you both know, the owner of the newspaper and the editor of the newspaper decide not to run the truth about the water supply being poisoned when they capitulate to the interests and the influence of corporate and political interests. So you're welcome to attend, even if you're not in the chorus. But the good thing about that project is that, as Peter mentioned earlier, if we've done our work, someone that we didn't plan on participating ends up doing something disruptive. And for us, that happened in Ohio. And that woman, she stormed the stage and she said, "Let the doctor speak." and then the doctor just started spouting eugenics.
Yeah, right.
And everyone went dead silent.
Right.
Someone said recently, they said, "Are you, I forget. There was an institution that was nervous about us bringing our work there because they had people from liberal and conservative perspectives in the room." And I said, "Don't worry, everyone will feel conflicted."
Right.
And that's the goal.
Right.
That's
Indeed.
the goal. And then sit with that together and not leave for 2 hours, and then we'll see what happens. Anyway, I've been an avid listener to your podcast since Peter mentioned it, and I'm honored to have been on it. Thank you both.
Thank you.
No, this is a really a special conversation for me. So thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate the opportunity.
I like that we have that leeway to be like more flexible with boundaries. Also, just like we could not, I mean, Peter could not have done that like a few years ago, and we could not, I mean, it's just feels very freeing, I think.
It is nice. I also, journalists did not invent legacy journalism either. Like, I feel like, it's working within those structures is like working within a hierarchy of any institution, and it's not easy. And we like, I on my end am like pitching away and getting frustrated when people turn me down, but I've now seen from the other side how complicated it actually is. But boundary dissolution is it for us. Dionysus, the god of theater, is the god of boundary dissolution. The boundaries between individuals, as Nietzsche said, the principium individuationis, the breaking down of what separates us. And I feel like theater is a psychotropic technology for delivering that without a hangover. and that's why I've discovered working with these audiences over the last 18 years, because when an audience is opened by a performance, to simply turn on the lights and let them file out is a missed opportunity.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for coming over.
Yeah, thank you both. I appreciate it.
Well, Brian, I'll see you in D.C. on the 21st at the Ebenezer United Methodist Church on Capitol Hill with a refutation. And then the next day, the 22nd, at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library for a second performance.
Are they going to be like previews? Are you going to, is this open for review? Or are you going to be...
I've just got a minor role in this, Elizabeth, but I'll tell you what, we will give you the exclusive if you want to, hop on Amtrak, because I would love to read your review. But the fact is that actually it's bigger than all of us. The event's the thing.
Personally, I can't wait for award season when we'll start seeing things like was Peter Mark snubbed?
Oh yes, snubs.
Was he
snubbed? That would be great.
They picked Bill Kemp.
It's like
they picked Bill Kemp. Was Peter Mark snubbed?
It's a preemptive snub. It's guaranteed to be a snub.
You know what? Guaranteed to be a snub. That's, of course, it's guaranteed to be a snob. So I think that's going to be on both our tombstones, our graves will be guaranteed to be a snub and guaranteed to be a snob. All right. Well, that's it for us today. I've got to say, but that was also one of the chattiest guests we've ever had.
Yes. No, Brian is
no need for questions.
Right. I know. You just send him in a direction and he takes it from there.
Yes, it's like a homing pigeon.
I'd say more like a running back who does the long, can do 80-yard runs.
Is that a sports thing?
Yes, that's a sports reference.
Is that a sports thing? Okay. Well, please join us next time for another of our signature Marx and Vincentelli productions, world famous. We have listeners everywhere in the world, I happen to know. Online, you can find us at marxvincentelli.substack.com. Please subscribe, follow us, tell your friends. Seriously, tell them that they're totally, I don't want to say losers, a little strong, and also I want to know where people stand on this whole ushers telling people what to do about the scrolling thing. Very divisive issue.
Yeah.
I got a little spicy in there.
Yeah, you need, I think maybe a little bit of a retreat somewhere, Elizabeth, to calm yourself. You've adopted too much of the New Yorker person's attitude about theater. I'm much more zen, as everyone who knows me knows. And yes, and look for us also on social media. I'm on Threads and Blue Sky. Elizabeth is on Blue Sky. And,
mostly, yes.
And maybe soon, we keep talking about this, we want to set up a Marx and Vincentelli Instagram account, which we really should do.
With completely incriminating photographs of us.
Exactly. That's
We're going to get ahead of the scandals by putting them on Instagram. That's it. All right. Well, over and out for today.